how did you how did your life get cross paths? You were at the DFA.
Yes, under President Cory Aquino's
Okay,
time. Yeah.
okay. This was.
And I came back in 1988, and after 3 months of studying what I can do in the country, I presented the report. And President Aquino said, "No one will implement this except you, so please stay."
Okay.
So I stayed, and after 1 year, I said, "Ma'am, I've done my work. I set up science and technology diplomacy under an economic context."
Yes.
And sabi niya, "No, you finish my term." So I had to finish her term, and on the last day of my term, 2 ambassadors were also bidding goodbye. I took them to President Ramos. And
Okay.
lo and behold, I said, "Mr. President, I'd also like to bid goodbye."
Nag-e-exit ka na sana.
Oo. Kasi my term was over. And courtesy naman, new president, siyempre courtesy resignation.
Yes.
Then he said, "No, stay." So the 2 ambassadors left, and I was hauled into the Rizal room.
Okay.
And he said, "You know, I have heard so much about your work,
Okay.
and maybe we should talk." And I thought it
Alright.
was a short talk. It took about an hour. And oh my God, I said, "What is this?"
Okay.
He said, "You really should stay. You can help me further in my new thrust.
There
And
you are.
you are better prepared for it because you were abroad. And I know that the Department of Foreign Affairs will benefit from someone with a global economic exposure."
Okay.
So I said,
Okay.
"Sir, my bags are packed. I have actually lost income when I served in the administration. And honest to goodness, I said, I think my retirement is for a tenured position that I had given up. And I cannot give up."
Yes.
So I said, "I will think it over." He said,
Oh.
"No, you talk to General Jose Almonte." I said, "Who is this general?"
Oh my.
So I did not know, but it was Apin Talisayon who introduced me to General Almonte. And apparently it was through Apin and General Almonte that they heard about my work in the DFA. That was exactly Raul Manglapu's brainchild, science and technology,
Yes.
but with an economic twist.
Oo.
So it was new because everyone was saying technology will be the driver of economic growth,
Yes,
and you
yes,
cannot
yes.
but get into that.
Yes.
Since I'm a techie buff, and in the early part of my career, I was invited by the Nobel laureates for a Pugwash conference on science and world affairs.
Yes.
So siguro nakita nila General Almonte na, oh, this guy has something to say and contribute. So after talking the following day to General Almonte, he convinced me that President Ramos has a very good plan. And so I remember distinctly what President Ramos said. "You know, my father started in the DFA,
Yes.
and I know what you can add to them." I said, "Sir, what is it?" "They're weak in economics. There are very few who understand economics. And especially for you,
Yeah.
you were abroad, you were in the
Yes.
private sector,
Yes.
academe, and you could help." So I said, okay. They gave me an appointment.
Yeah. Yes.
Undersecretary for
Economic
Economic Affairs.
Affairs. It was a new office, right? It was a new function in the department, correct?
Though there was an old one.
Uh-huh.
But the Office of Economic Affairs was run by an
Yeah, right.
undersecretary
Yes.
whose team was rather lean. Kasi nga, specially functional yon, ang mga department support were lacking. So I had to make do with the talents that I could scrounge around from the DFA. And I did find a handful, 3 or 4.
Oo. But yeah, no, medyo lumaki yung office, 'di ba? When
lumaki.
you came in there. But tell me now, that already gave you an idea of what a portion of what the man's vision was for foreign relations, ano?
Very much. You know, our talk when I first had a chance was really steeped in development. Talagang, I said, oh my God, for a West Pointer, an engineer, this guy's talking economics, economic development, but one with a social context. Sabi niya, no, we cannot afford to have this country bogged down by the poverty and by the unemployment. And sabi ko, oh, that rings well with me.
Oh, oh.
Because when I was in the U.S., I wrote notes for the late Senator Ninoy. And among others, Senator Ninoy was also attracted to my ideas on how economic growth through poverty alleviation will spur a more sustainable development path. And so I shared with him those stories, and President Ramos also got so enervated by my stories. And that was what I did in the DFA. I had to make sure our ambassadors fully understood what was this philosophy.
So, in effect, may marching orders ba sa kanya, or he was assuming that given your advocacy and your particular experience and skill set for focus on economic development, well, was there even any any marching order?
Very specific.
Talaga?
Sabi niya, you know, it is not only the DFA that you have to convince. You have to convince the bureaucracy. I said, the bureaucracy? Yes. So, next month, in a cabinet meeting, I will request all cabinet undersecretaries to listen to your presentation.
Oh my, oh my.
And he was there. President Ramos was there the whole morning in Malacanang.
Oh.
And I gave a lecture on precisely what I thought was needed by the country. And then he noticed some departments were not represented. And he advised, I don't know who, but those absent must be present in the next meeting.
Oh my.
Oh, I said, my goodness, this president really means business. And so I was very fascinated by the way he wanted everyone to understand what he was aiming at.
Ano yun, that spoke of the man,
Yeah.
his style. I mean, everybody's got to be on the same frame of mind, on the same track. We have got to be aligned.
Yeah. With the military in him. If you are not one with me, we lose all of these battles and wars. So I thought that General Monte said, we have to get you engaged also in training these people under the national security umbrella. And I said, that's good, because economics is part of the security family that has been already practiced in other countries.
Particularly in developed nations. But how did you see that, for example? I mean, we were a developing country, not exactly... Well, at that time when you came in, we were Asia's sick man. The sick man of Asia. But how did you take to that? I mean, that kind of vision, that kind of frame of mind of the new chief executive. I suppose you were pretty happy and glad.
Very happy, because President Cory set the foundations.
Okay.
So there was already a return to democracy, and he was a president who was saying, we still need this democratic tradition, but economic growth will spur our growth, which was true. So what was particularly interesting was it was under a national security framework that economic growth was being tracked. And I said, that's good.
Broad, Ibig sabihin, all-inclusive.
All-inclusive.
Yung approach, hindi piecemeal.
One day nga, when I was at the DFA, ambassadors usually come home for briefings. And he issued a memo. Bring these ambassadors to Smoky Mountain. I said, this is really good. So the ambassadors were hauled to Smoky Mountain to see what was happening. And then Father Ben Beltran, the priest there, gave this briefing to the ambassadors. Unluckily, I was sent abroad at that time when they were in Smoky Mountain. But I found out that, indeed, the president's interest was for ambassadors to really represent a country that they should know firsthand. You cannot just sip cocktails and think you know your country. You should walk the talk.
Yeah. But that was also that was also the shift, paradigm shift. It wasn't just about conducting, social relations or attending one cocktail another diplomatic party. It was now selling the Philippines, giving out the new message of what the new Philippines is about.
Exactly.
Huh?
I think he sensed very well that all these political security issues, economic finance issues, and sociocultural issues had to be tackled parang period at a time. So parang 2 years political, the next 2 years economic, the last two social. And I said, maybe that will work well because at least people will understand you need a peace and order for the stable economic growth. And lo and behold, it was some of these major industrialists who said, were it not for that foundation, they would not have invested long term. So yung mga long-term investments sila, naghintay lang ng time when the outlook would be more propitious for sinking money here rather than abroad.
Yes.
So that was part of the message that we had to bring to our ambassadors. Look, even our own industrialists are already investing in our own country. That's the best proof that something is happening in your country.
How? Well, you got to meet up with him, up close and personal. But what was the pulse at DFA at the time? I mean, you had a new chief executive coming in. I mean, what was it like then? I mean, how did they view the new chief executive?
For one, I think having worked with President Cory in the restoration of democracy, they knew this was going to be a continuity.
Okay.
But having been educated in the United States, they would have thought that, amboy.
Amboy.
So
may plus, may minus.
So sabi namin, that is hard to dispel unless we show that we have focus. And good enough, he focused on our regional economic cooperation, ASEAN.
ASEAN, Yun yung initial,
And then, nung Bill Clinton had initiated APEC, he told me, I want to host a summit. And he said, Mr. President, I have only a staff of 4.
Yes.
Sabi niya, well, you can mobilize the rest of the DFA and the rest of the bureaucracy.
Correct.
I said, okay, I'll convince my foreign ministers to make sure that my time is equally divided between DFA and the rest of the bureaucracy.
Right. Well, tell me the environment we were in when FVR came in, foreign relations wise.
Definitely, because of the restoration of democracy, we stood high in the eyes of our democratic partners. No?
Okay.
Other than the US, it was the EU.
Okay.
And since we had been looking towards their investment in the Philippines, President Ramos really focused first on the EU. Because during his maybe stay with President Cory, he realized that the US was not as gung-ho in investing in the Philippines yet. Remember, there was this basis issue.
Yes.
So that was tough.
That we did not ratify, or extend the basing agreement left a bad taste in the mouth at that time,
Right.
So EU.
EU was a very good parang corner of the world to attract to invest in the Philippines. And luckily, we discovered that EU was very interested in more Asian trade and investment because of the looming rise of China. And they had to have a listening post. They had to have a very good understanding from the region itself what this Chinese rise may mean. So we were lucky in that we had very good people in Europe who would give us a sensing of what they wanted. In fact, during the APEC, they insisted that they become part of APEC. And they had sent delegations to me, and I said, unfortunately, our charter does not allow. Maybe dialogue partnership is okay.
Yes. Dialogue.
And I said, if your interest is in doing this, why don't we think of the world having different groups that then can talk to each other.
Yes.
Because India also wanted to be part of APEC. And I said, unfortunately, there is no Indian water that touches the Pacific. And they said, no, Diego Garcia Island.
Oh, that's, yeah, fringe.
I brought it to the APEC senior officials. They said, no, it's too small. It's not the strategic thing we're looking at. So definitely because of the new foreign outlook on the Philippines, EU, India, China loomed bigger, and ASEAN became, of course, the natural place where we were having these constant dialogues.
And FBR took advantage of it,
Yeah.
No, he used it to the hilt. Not just, not just specifically for Philippine interests, but also creating, the image as a regional leader. Was that something that
I think his father's legacy was foremost in his mind.
Carried on.
He always had an inkling that the continuity of the good things that leaders do must be carried forward to the next generations. And in that spirit, he did it in the Boao Forum. Because when he asked me to chair the technical committee meeting that was moribund, he said, you can do something, revive it. So he flew me to Hainan, and I realized that most of the people in the Boao Forum at the start were diplomats who did not have the economic background. So I knew what the president wanted. Make sure that among the Australian, Japanese, and Chinese proponents for Boao, the economic issues of APEC stand out. But the good thing was he said, Davos discusses Asian issues. Why will it need Europeans? We must talk about our own issues. And so his marching order was, make sure we do not lose the agenda to the West. Because if our issues are discussed by the Europeans in Davos, parang, what are we? We must discuss it ourselves.
Yes.
Boao was born that way.
The idea being, the best messenger is the person, the expert from the area, right?
And he was very good. President Ramos was very good in making sure that Australia, Japan, and China were on board because that idea was born at the fringes of the APEC meetings.
So the economic perspective, but it was also, I guess it was also a directive, to sell the Philippines, no?
Yes.
As an investment destination.
Always. Everywhere he went, in international fora, regional fora, bilateral, it was always the Philippines as an investment destination because we needed a foreign, not only money, technology. He knew as an engineer that it is technology that we need.
So we needed to bring it in to jump, to make the jump. Okay.
So his infrastructure program, his power program, were all enervated by foreign direct investment.
But actually, yun nga yung problema natin nung pumasok siya, di ba? We had an infrastructure gap, we had a power crisis, and that speaks of a certain amount of savvy also, di ba, sir? Because he brought in the investors we needed, and they became part of the solution, to the identified needs.
I think the engineer in him was critical in jump-starting the economy. We underinvested for long on the infrastructure, roads, ports, bridges, schools, public hospitals, that he realized this is how you democratize economic growth.
Okay. Tapos, meron pa eh. The other leg of the FVR administration was breaking up the monopolies and diba? But that was what our foreign investors and strategic players was looking for as well, right? transportation, telecommunications, shipping,
The
retail
burden
trade.
of breaking up these monopolies was very strategically studied, and a team was working on that. And among others, we were asked to set up Philippines 2000 to sell the idea that what these other people working on the breaking up of the monopolies would be doing, and so we must educate the Philippine public what that is really is. So that was my role. My other portfolio during the Ramos years was to make sure this National Security Council group, which was educating the public on Philippines 2000, understood what we were doing.
How did they know? What was the reaction from the foreign community?
Well, they were very surprised at first that it is the president whose hands-on approach to problems were being observed by everyone, no? Because it was rare that a president would be singling out certain issues. It usually would come from the cabinet. But I think he has studied well enough that for the previous decade that he has been involved in the resurrection of democracy, and then his previous stint in the military and in the police show the countryside situation, then he really had a deep understanding.
Unique yung yung naging training niya, yung background na nakatulong eventually.
So I think in the end, what he did was really sum up his collective years of experience into a plan. And more equitable growth for the country through foreign direct investment that brings technology.
Yes. Yeah. Pero di ba mayroon din siyang he kind of retooled as well the focus of the DFA, sir. And this, I mean, is our OFW concerns, no? Dati-rate, okay, so we have workers out there, couple of million of them. But, diba, that was also something that he said, let's not forget what these people are doing for us, for the economy.
I think traveling around the country, he realized na ang dami-daming Pilipino were reliant on our OFW remittances. And it was obvious that this has become the savior of the country during his term, kasi yung influx of remittances was about 10% already of the GDP. And then the number of people in the select places where technology has been drawn has been increasing.
Yes.
So much so that when there was a tragic case in Singapore,
floor contemplation.
it became the rallying point of the last years of his administration, that the OFWs must be harnessed really for better positioning of the plight of the Philippines. So I heard him very well that jobs must be created for these people rather than have them leave. So akala ng iba kasi we were always just sending people abroad without thinking they could be employed here. But definitely in all of his speeches all over the country, I realized that he really wanted also these local jobs. So yung infra in the local scene would encourage industries to relocate, jobs to be created, so the talents of the Philippines will not leave.
But at the same time, those who did leave and were working, I think the mandate also for the DFA, di ba?
Very clear.
Sa kanya, look after their concerns. And
Very clear.
the contemplation case was a wake-up call. No?
In a way, it was a wake-up call, but even before that, the president harnessed an office, started in the martial law years, the Commission on Filipinos Overseas.
Oh, okay.
Kasi this was attached to the president before, and during President Cory's time, and during President Ramos's time, it became a responsibility of the Department of Foreign Affairs. So we made sure that we sensed what the foreign communities of Filipinos wanted. So I was also assigned
Oh, okay.
Kasi, sabi niya, since you have worked abroad, I'll ask Secretary Manglapus to make sure that you're part of that group. So, we revamped the idea that the overseas Filipinos are merely sending remittances. What we said, they are the brains of the country. This is the brain drain.
Yeah.
We must bring home their talent, their knowledge, their technology, and their connections. So more than the remittances, we emphasize transfer of scientific and technical know-how. So I was instructed to revive a NEDA, United Nations program on expatriate Filipinos helping the country through their short-term stay in the Philippines. So we started it under President Aquino, but it received a boost under President Ramos.
Under Ramos, ano?
Yeah.
Well, diba, pag
And the
you
OFW
take the
phenomenon
opportunity na, no? Oo.
was really highlighted by the contemplation case, because
case.
here are talented Filipinos, but here are also poor Filipinos who don't have jobs in the Philippines.
Yeah.
But what can you do while they are abroad? So President Ramos demonstrated, I think, a deeper understanding of the phenomenon. Because from the contemplation case, I had seen face to face how he handled the issue. I think it was Holy Thursday during the contemplation case that he called in Secretary Manglapus, Secretary Confessor, and myself.
Romulo na nun, di ba?
Romulo.
Oo.
So yung dalawang secretaries tsaka ako.
Yeah.
Kasi ako yung Commission on Filipinos Overseas.
Yes.
The good thing was, he asked, why is there no coordination among cabinet members on the OFW situation? The DFA is not only for passports. We have to take care of our nationals abroad.
Yes.
The Department of Labor is also responsible in part, but who monitors while they're there? So here was the classic case. We had a good system, but through time, because it grew, konting-konti na yung taong nagsiserve for the overseas workers, we, in the DFA, mobilized the communities to help each other. And it proved effective. But, because of this one incident, we discovered there was lack of legal assistance.
Oh, yes.
Yon ang number one, lack of legal assistance. So, as an aftermath of the case, President Ramos created an Undersecretary for migrant workers in the FA.
Plus, I think legislation was also enacted, di ba, for the Migrant Workers Act.
Migrant Workers Act.
And then, eventually provided for a budget for legal assistance
Yes.
and repatriation.
Right.
But even before that, I remember joining a few of the visits overseas. But it eventually became a staple in all these overseas visits that there always should be an engagement with the Philcoms, with the Filipino communities, no?
Yes. He was very popular among the Filipinos overseas because he could resonate with their interests. Everywhere he went, he always asked the DFA to make sure there's a Philcom meeting.
Oo, di ba? Tsaka, yun yung staples naalala ko. Filipino community, business organizations, di ba? Round tables or face-to-face with our delegation, business delegation, and their counterparts in the host nation, no?
Yeah, always. Yeah.
No. So hindi pasyal lang talaga ito.
And he was really giving them the message na you are part of the efforts to develop the country. So he would really hammer the fact that you are sending money, but you are also supposed to send us the best practices. Talagang engineer siya. Parating sinasabi niya na, you learn more abroad in your work. Why don't you transfer that to the Philippines?
That experience.
And that was my job at the DFA, to harness the science and technology talents through a UN program.
At uh, although sayang, we lost two good secretaries with that, Secretary Romulo and Secretary Confessor. Foreign policy as a tool of national security and international trade. Here we got to the bulk of the work that you were actually doing. ASEAN, very early on in his administration, we hosted a ministerial meeting, right? Oh. And then the next year, 93, U.S. President Clinton calls APEC to Blake Island. And that's where you got your marching orders for Manila Subic.
Yes. We were in a car somewhere, and he said, "We will host a summit." Mr. President, I only have 4 people.
But that was just 3 years.
Make it happen.
No? That was just 3 years.
Yeah.
No, we were able to do it. I mean, how did he? How did he master those?
He is a consummate strategist. So he told me, since we are planning on this, do your homework in the DFA so that you have a team that supports you. So I did that. I asked the secretary to please make me talk to the young officers. So I was given a forum. The young cadets who we were training in the Foreign Service Institutes listened to me. And I said, we are hosting one of the most important meetings that may ever shape your careers as young diplomats. And I have a problem because I don't have people. Let me tell you what are involved. So I enumerated the kinds of committees that I will form: trade and investment, economic technical cooperation, and then socio-cultural relations. And after my speech, I said, I need a few of you. The whole class volunteered.
Wow.
Over 20.
Wow.
So when they presented themselves to Secretary Romulo had to say, approved.
Hindi siya nagulat, all of you, really?
Because he realized the magnitude, and it came from the president, that there must be a team to support his ideas.
But he said we have to host one of these summits. But did he give like 3 years, let's do it? Ganun ba yan? O
he knew that our turn was coming in by rotation. Kasi the meetings were always one on the Pacific side in Asia, one on the Pacific side in the Americas.
Yes.
So pabalik-balik yan.
Yes.
Sabi niya, after US, we'll have Indonesia,
Bogor.
Bogor. So then after that, a developed country, Japan naman.
Osaka.
Medyo north. Then tayo naman. So 3 years, you're right, 3 years to prepare. So he asked me to make sure that my Secretary of Foreign Affairs understood the magnitude of the work. Because a summit is not easy in a rapidly exploding knowledge age.
Yes.
And having consulted for IBM, I knew what we were faced. And I said, all of this information that will come from 18 economies, it's not going to be easy. Kasi imagine everything, not only trade and investment, agriculture, tourism, public works, finance, lahat yan nandun. Parang the whole United Nations in 18 countries.
Capitalized.
Wow, I said, this is impossible.
But he actually was really looking at just a few key sectors, diba? I remember from you. TILF, trade and investment, liberalization and facilitation. No, those were some of the few catchwords. And then, if I also remember, wasn't that the founding or the first meeting or the first of a few meetings of the ABAC?
Yes.
No.
It was Secretary Roy Navarro who implemented the marching order that there must be an APEC Business Advisory Council. And of course, it was not easy to do because the question was who will represent whom in all of this. So eventually, President Ramos thought that small and medium enterprises should always be there. One of the three ABAC from each country and economy must be small and medium enterprise related.
Yung ano, no? Yung represent.
So the
Yes.
two would be big business,
Yes.
but one must always represent small and medium enterprise.
He,
Very,
he liked focusing on the little guy, ano?
yeah.
Ano rin, ano? Parang, which runs right alongside, I guess, yung vision niya ng empowerment, no?
Yes. But it was hard because in the chain of the senior officials, my first resistance was from the Americans.
Oy,
The
bakit?
Americans didn't want SME because all of their interests were in multinational investments. So if the multinationals were investing, their concern was they would match them with the big players in each country.
Oo.
But President Ramos had a different thought.
Oo.
No, we must link the small to this.
Oo.
And we were lucky because President Clinton, in his State of the Nation address, mentioned something about his interest in reviving small business in America. I had to make sure the entire APEC understood that between President Ramos and President Clinton, this small and medium enterprise idea was going to flourish in APEC. I had a hard time because meeting after meeting, I could not convince many economists. So I took the cue from what President Ramos was saying. You know, among the Chinese, it's really the small
Yeah.
that mattered.
Yeah.
So Taiwan, it's the small businesses that made Taiwan grow. And China, because it was then becoming market socialist, it's emphasizing small farms.
Yes, they were moving out of,
Yes.
no.
Then they had export processing zones.
Yes.
But they had to be fueled by local suppliers. So small din yun. In the end, the small, medium enterprises would be linked to the big multinationals so they would grow.
Yeah.
The Americans had to believe me when I started quoting their own president. So they finally agreed that there was need for a small and medium enterprise working group and that their ministers of commerce, trade and industry
yeah.
must focus on the SMEs.
Oo. Sabi rin ni makikita mo rin yung sabi ni FVR because he used the influence of the Philippines as chair, no?
Yes.
Of how the agenda moved forward.
Well, we were surprised. In Blake Island, the Philippine delegation had a script. Okay? And the script said, these are our priorities. Impromptu, according to Trade Undersecretary Edsel Custodio, the President offered to host an APEC Center for Small and Medium Enterprises.
Oh yeah, right.
But it was for technology development. So nag-marry yung kanyang interest, small and medium, and then highly technical. So it fell on me to implement that. That's me. APEC Center for Technology Exchange and Training for Small and Medium Enterprises. I had a study made by UPISSI. Then I had intergovernment agency meetings on the idea. And guess who was the first to object? Department of Trade. Because they said,
Ironic.
it is not in our priority because our priorities are like this. I said, tell that to your president. I said, when you hear your leader say this, you just follow and study what you can do. Because I think this is something that has been in his mind for a long time and not just like at the instant flick of his imagination.
Yes.
And I had a hard time selling it domestically. I had a hard time with the Americans. I had a hard time with my local. So I used the examples of the small and medium enterprises in Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, and Taiwan. I said, where are they now? They are all newly industrialized economies,
Yes.
thanks to the small. They listened.
Terrific. Our own department was echoing
Comfort zone eh. Their comfort zone was really dealing with the big businesses.
big business.
Kasi if you're dealing with the small, ang hirap mag-coordinate with hundreds of cooperatives.
Right. And then uniformity, standards. Yeah, but you're right. That's exactly how the new industrialized economies developed. Also, as a tool of national security, at about this time, if you remember, we lost our security umbrella. We said we asked the Americans to leave both Clark and Subic, and at this time we started seeing fishing vessels occupying, isolated reefs and shoals. But eventually, they became more frequent and went into conflict with our own fishermen at that time. But FBR used ASEAN,
Yes, and Boao, eventually
Boao,
later
yes,
Boao.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
The ASEAN centrality on setting the agenda and discussion actually survived because the ASEAN Regional Forum,
Yes.
which is a group of not only ASEAN but the dialogue partners
Yes, yes.
who have the security angle in mind, had dialogues, and eventually it was institutionalized with ministerial meetings and elevated to summits. The interesting thing is we presaged this in Blake Island because I perused the documents, and American think tanks already were saying, but Asia Pacific economic security, you need political security. Of course, that's what we knew in the security business.
yes, yes.
But to elevate it as critical to economic development was something that we had to sell. So the political
as
agenda,
a key discussion point, you mean? no?
Yeah.
During
it must always be discussed. So you can see that in the summits, statements were always on trade and investment liberalization,
yes.
facilitation, and under President Ramos, economic and technical cooperation.
Yes, yes.
But always, there must be a political security dimension somewhere in the working groups. Because your APEC, economic, yung political security are always side issues. If I were to describe it, it is always in the fringes of the meetings
Yeah.
in the initial years.
Oh.
But eventually, when economic reports were filed, they were hinted at as critical. So the South China Sea issue
Yeah.
were hinted at even in APEC. But our understanding was that indeed we had to make sure that China rises peacefully. That's why the Boao Forum was created by President Ramos. The
Engaging,
peaceful rise. Engaging them rather than being standoffish and say, look the other way around.
Oh.
Yeah.
Then instead of people taking hardline positions,
Yes.
keep them engaged.
Imagine President Ramos, to this date, always reminds the world. When China sent its navy in the 13th, 14th century to the waters of Southeast Asia, India, and Africa, the naval armada did not colonize. They opened markets.
Oh yeah.
That's a very stinging rebuke on the West that used their navy to colonize and then open markets.
Yes. Ito reverse, reverse. Oh.
So maganda, gawa ng his theory, I think, is that really, these Chinese are beholden to a civilization that's very Confucian. And in his writings, in his columns, and in his speeches,
Yes.
President Ramos would remind us, this giant was really a very peaceful country, but the colonial experience, a century of humiliation, caused them to think differently.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to adjust to.
Yeah. ASEAN evolved. Well, a new, a new forum emerged, the ARF, the ASEAN Regional Forum, and so we could separate trade and economics to the main ASEAN summits, but ARF eventually became the forum for discussing the security issues.
Because ASEAN is a nuclear-free zone. And we know that, among others, there are some countries that have not signed on to this non-nuclear proliferation treaty. And it was, of course, dramatically shown in the last summit of North Korea and the US, that this non-proliferation issue is in the minds of all leaders of the world, not only in APEC or ASEAN, but globally. So I think that recognition that there is a political dimension to your economic growth was very well emphasized in the strategic thinking of President Ramos. He knew it. Because when we hosted APEC, what did he do? He first made sure that there was an understanding that even domestically, those who were anti-APEC, anti-globalization, understood that even the communist regimes have turned market socialist.
Yes. Yes.
So,
yes.
parang he's saying, why are you more popish than the Pope? Even the communists have gone market.
Yes, yes,
And
that's
so,
true.
domestically, those who were anti-globalization, why are you still
Yeah.
not moving with the times?
Yes.
I had to stress that point in many public fora because, to me, the hardline friends on the left always thought that this was a sellout. But if you have your own strategy
Yes.
and you stand by your own strengths, together with your ASEAN partner who are central in APEC, you can make a difference. And this is what happened to the South China Sea Code of Conduct.
Yeah.
Because it was born so that there would be a long-term parang confidence-building schemes.
Right, right. Yeah. No? Prior to that, wala,
Wala.
None.
Yeah.
And yeah, he planted he planted the seed for that kind of engagement. And 20 years on, we're still working at it, but at least
It's a slow process.
no.
But we are really sensing what would be the best way of dealing with this rising China issue. And of course, the president has been very much instrumental in calming the Philippine public
Yeah.
about what this situation might lead to. So the Boao Forum is a good place. But then the ASEAN-China dialogue that was most recently completed in Singapore shows you step by step. But as a strategist, I think the military mind of President Ramos says, but this is actually the new world.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are so many factors influencing decisions of leaders.
Right. Right.
He was always telling us, you criticize me, but I am juggling so many things while I'm crossing a tightrope. Tell that to any other leader.
Oh, nga, no?
I mean, the world has changed.
And in true FBR fashion, we came out with MAPA.
MAPA, yeah.
No?
The Manila Action Plan for APEC.
Oh, no?
Classic. Trade and investment liberalization was the agenda of the West. And we said, as a poor country, with small and medium enterprises in mind, among others, we must have economic, technical cooperation. Help the small,
Ecotech, yeah.
help the industries that need help through technical cooperation. Again, it was a hard sell. Because many of the advanced countries said, no, you have your own national priorities, you can help yourselves. But I said, it is difficult because you are growing very fast, especially with technology.
Yes, yes.
And we are left behind. My main concern, our talents are all abroad. The brain drain was so massive in the Philippines.
Or they were raiding ours. Yeah.
And they were poaching,
Yeah. Yeah.
skimming the best and the brightest.
Yeah.
And I made sure that message was sent to the world in my speeches everywhere, from Europe to Washington, D.C., to Northeast Asia. I said, the war for talent is the new war. Industries will be fueled by the brains of many countries. But if you now are getting the best and the brightest, and they do not help their home countries, then the gap widens. That's why I had to introduce President Ramos to the Silicon Valley people.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a great beginning. He warmed up to it, and he then made sure our local industrialists recognized what the new age was going to be. Di ba? He was so proud he showed to President Clinton yung office niya sa Malacanang.
Mhm.
He had a tabletop that had a computer-guided retrieval of memos.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you recall those times when he had memos in papers with a barcode
Yeah. Mm.
that would say, you have to report to me not later than a date, and you must consult with all other relevant agencies, complete staff work.
Yep. Yep.
Wow, President Clinton was so amazed. And so President Clinton was in writing for our APEC book, for the book on democracy and discipline.
Okay.
President Clinton gave us a note that said he was among the most competent leaders in Asia at the time that he traveled around this part of the world. Kasi nakita niya, this guy is a techie.
Yeah.
President Ramos knew how to harness technology.
Oh.
And sabi niya, I didn't even have this in the White House. Wow! Ang goosebumps all over my body hearing that they don't even have this in the
Tracking
White House.
system, And yet, diba, this was one of the most developed and powerful economies of the world. Learning from us.
So MAPA was launched electronically.
Yes.
Sa Subic, he pressed the button and said, okay, our Manila Action Plan for APEC is already available to the world. And that was an indication that we were more advanced than other countries. In fact, some Japanese were telling me, you know, when we hosted the APEC in Tokyo, we should have thought of what you were doing. The electronic databases.
Tokyo, Osaka.
The
95,
Osaka.
95,
Oh. And sabi ko, well, we had to do it because we had limited people. The Japanese bureaucracy, they were fielding like 20 to 40 people in the TILF meetings. One topic and they had two experts. In the Philippines, 20 topics, one expert. So I said, we need help. We need to electronically. And President Ramos was very keen in saying, we have to know the issues of every country on every matter because that is important. So the rice issue, the Japanese were against the rice importation policy.
Yes.
So there were protesters from Japan who visited in the DFA before the summit. And the point was, why are you liberalizing rice trade? Did you not know that you are killing the culture of Japan? I said, why? Well, rice is the basis of our countryside.
Yeah.
Even the sake that you drink is part of that culture.
Yeah.
And the geisha culture, which is a very honorable tradition, may be lost. And I thought, wow, we must tell that to the people, that indeed they feel the cultural element will be lost. And I had to make sure the rest of APEC understood. So we proposed to the Japanese, okay, liberalize rice, buy from the Philippines and the rest of APEC, but if you do not want the rice because it is not Japonica, store it outside. And when there are disasters around the world, donate it.
Oo nga naman.
Wow! I found out years later that they adopted that. And so even UNCTAD was quoted in a report saying this creative way of solving the issue of buying goods from the poor countries is a creative way of solving the problem. And that really comes from the atmosphere where President Ramos always says, you must be creative. Kasi kung you're stuck to the solutions of the past, you will never win in any...
he was an out-of-the-box person.
Very.
Very. I mean, he did recognize that there were, cut and dry solutions, but he always challenged people, right? I mean,
very much so.
Look, okay, you have one solution, but I'm quite sure there are a number of others that are a bit more, visionary, more innovative.
Yeah. His mind was really shaped by technology, equity, social progress. Kaya nga, you have to be creative eh. Kasi if you are Decahon, what will happen is that the Decahon failed in the Philippines. But look at China. They adopted a market socialist economy in the midst of a communist regime.
Right.
That was out of the box.
Mm.
And they erased 60% of their poverty within a generation.
Yes. Yes.
And that's exactly what he saw as a potential for the country.
Lalo na yun. May iwan palagi sa akin yung sinasabi mo na yung how he used technology as a tool, no? While many people shun it, because, well, it's new, you have to relearn, there's a learning curve. No? FBR jumped into it, you know. He always took advantage of and used it, you know, to help him, in his governance, you know. Okay.
I think it is that openness that made other leaders recognize that the democratic tradition that we have can be harnessed for the better. Kaya nga, when we wrote a biography on the president, by we I mean my American counterpart authors, is Scott Thompson.
Yes.
I argued hard with him. I said, you might be seeing this from the Western perspective. I see it from my perspective, the way President Ramos sees it.
Yes.
And I said, definitely, democracy is the Western agenda. But we have our own sense of democracy. Because si Secretary Manglapus, during his Ateneo years, I think thought of democracy as the foundation of all ancient societies. Kasi yung mga fireside chat sa mga villages, maliliit lang kasi yung villages, no?
Yes.
People had a say in governance. Kaya noong si President Ramos came around, sabi ko, wow, this tradition of a military mind must have been shaped by his observance in the barangays and in the corners of the country that he visited. So observant siya. Kaya nga nung sinabi lang, what is your theme? Well, it's discipline and democracy. The military discipline, but the socio-economic, democratic tradition.
Yeah. Tell me how FBR's brand of leadership and management as a public servant impress on you and on the DFA?
The DFA had a technocratic sense of things. The technical skills will make things happen. But I think the president has really a deep feel for the communities that he worked with. And so it was very evident that between the technical and the social angle, he balanced it very well. He balanced it very well.
Was he able to redirect that techno?
Sa DFA, surprisingly, we were able to redirect because of the creation now of the Office of Migrant Welfare.
Okay.
So it was redirected there.
Okay.
But when it comes to how the other agencies of government coordinated with the DFA, the redirection was hampered by our lack of a national infrastructure for bureaucracies to communicate. Kasi ang landmark ni FVR, ang galing niyang i-integrate yung mga cabinet secretaries into a focused agenda. And I remember clearly that when he has a cabinet meeting, although he sounds na not listening to your report, yung pala he has studied it beforehand. And he will ask a pointed question after that. And then he will say, what did the others say? What did the others say? What did the others say? So he redirected some of that technical jargon to, how will it be impacting on the people? So, classic case nga yung mga situation, nagpo-promote kayo ng mga trade missions, anong klaseng products ang dinadala nyo? It might really be only the top. So, ang kanyang concern was, is there technology promotion that helps the small? Help them. So we organized in the DFA the Technology Information Promotion Systems under the
Ah.
UNDP.
Oo. Oo.
I won the right for the Philippines to have the Asia-Africa Bureau located in the DFA. And it was technologies of the small farmers, fisher folks, manufacturers. Gustong-gusto niya, pinagbibidan niya. Sabi niya, oh, look at this, Philippine product to, but the technology is homegrown. So nakita ko na, miski na technical, parating rinirelate niya dun sa social.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
kahit to mahirap, they have their own
Yeah.
indigenous technologies.
Oo.
Sabi ko, sir, that's called appropriate technology.
Appropriate. Oo. He never forgot the little guy, ano? No. He wasn't one to leave them behind. No.
I think something from his religious thinking,
Okay.
not in the sense of organized religion, but yung spiritual thinking niya, that the people should be served. Ang parati niya sinasabi, you leave this room at least as clean as when you found it. Better yet, improve on it. Sabi niya, you leave this life at least as better as when you found these people around you. So improve their lot. So parati, something like that.
Tell me about yung ano. He also emphasized professionalizing and making the DFA a more relevant institution, its people, the expectations for them, especially because they were on the front lines. They were overseas, and we had quite a large population overseas.
He was the first to recognize, I think, that the diplomatic community must harness the overseas Filipinos in a way that's not purely remittances. Kasi nga, the engineer in him will say, you know a lot of what's happening there. So, Dole eventually made sure that the laborers that we sent abroad were not only the low-level skills, but the higher-level skills with the intent of harnessing them. So that's the beauty of the thinking that our economic growth can be technologically propelled.
Given the directions FVR's foreign policy and foreign relations was taking, did you see anything that was lacking? Meron bang kulang na sana nagawa niya?
Yeah. Well, in our biography that we wrote, I consulted with him often, and whenever I would say, sir, what is your response to this comment? And he said, if these people were in my shoes, they would not see it as something humanly possible. Because if you ask any leader, he just has to recognize there are constraints. For example, we cannot just make everyone equitably happy right away.
Right.
So short term lang yan eh.
Yes.
Kaya nga nung he was saying that the continuity must be through the next presidents, and we realized that the next president did not quite continue his legacy. He got into the action that was needed for us to recalibrate our destiny. And I think that sense of continuity was very evident in many of the legacy issues that he had. For example, APEC. We must make sure that this Asia-Pacific thing becomes central to the world's discussion. That's why Boao Forum was born. And true enough, I said, because the Asia-Pacific trade at the time was already bigger than the Atlantic trade.
Yes.
So the technology flows were also bigger in this part of the world. And the young dynamic populations were in this part of the world. So he knew that in this century, the Asia-Pacific economies would propel dynamic global growth. And we're witnessing it now.
Yes.
But during his time, very few people would believe what he was saying. This is the Asia-Pacific century. And he used many phrases. Parang, Pax Americana is now Pax Asiatica. Pax Asiatica is now Pax ASEAN plus mga ganon. So he loved playing around with the theme, Asia-Pacific will become the center of global discussion on not only economy, but also the politics and security.
Would that be, to your mind, FBR's greatest legacy?
Well, the first one is the democratic tradition he preserved. So definitely that legacy he continued from the people power that he helped install. And that he also promoted with the longer term track after the next president quite did it differently. Second, I think the legacy of not only openness in politics but in the economy, because he opened our competitive forces, was very good. Our economy was really run by a few families in the past.
Yeah, handful.
And less than 100 at his time. But when he moved on, I think it was very clear that we liberalized it, and the boom in the economy was shown by the massive growth of skyscrapers, not only in the Makati area, but in other cities of the Philippines. To an ordinary person, that was a sign of growth. And to the economists who were saying, but that might be hollow, there's no manufacturing behind it, it's a jobless growth. I said, you know, it's up to the industrial group. It's up to the entrepreneurial class. He set the tone. Let's be open, let's be modernizing, use technology. We better follow up on our own. You're already empowered. You don't need a president to tell you do this, do that. In one session overseas, one person was asking, my family needs employment. And the president said, you know, it is nice to tell me that, but I will just redirect it to the appropriate people so that what he was telling this, you learn how to direct your questions to those who would have the power to help you. It's good that you tell me, but maybe what you should understand is you must know how to help yourselves through the step-by-step things. Because if he were doing it, he will be thinking, what, of 100 million Filipinos today? And so empowerment is one of his legacies that will live. And I think between the discipline and democracy that he installed, I think the empowerment is very clear now. We have a very buoyant democracy, and we have changes that are rapidly catching up with the world. And definitely we have the respectability and a place in the global polity, economy, society that we never had before.
Did we come of age during his, did the Philippines come of age during his term?
All of the newspaper accounts after APEC 1996 lauded his leadership. The Philippines has come of age. Definitely with the foreign direct investments in critical places, people knew this was the beginning of the growth period. And in that sense, he always said, we are a tiger economy. And he was very proud of that tiger economy status.
You wrote a book. There obviously have been interactions between you and FDR, even after he was post-98, his term. Well, what are those interactions like?
Well, it's all nation building.
What's the reminiscing about?
It's all nation building and our place in the world. I was already in the private sector when he asked me to help Boao Forum. I was no longer in government. Because I resigned 2 months after APEC finished. It was Canada's turn, and on February, I tendered my resignation. And according to the late June Losada, the president threw my paper to the floor. Yung resignation paper ko. Sabi ni June, boss naman, sana naman, nag-usap muna kayo. Sabi ko, I have been hinting to him many times na. Sabi ko, look, I'm literally worn out. I am sick.
So I remember.
I got sick.
Yes.
So, the advice of the people around him was, magbakasyon ka muna. But stay, finish his term. I said, you know, that will be nice. But honestly, the private sector needs me. Why? No one will translate what he wanted.
Ah.
Kasi sabi ko, that's my role now as an educator, as a, my immediate job after that was, I linked back to my Wall Street firm.
Yes, yes.
So, among others, we brought a sizable fund for a Mindanao Growth Fund, which unfortunately fizzled out when there was a kidnapping incident that made our skitterish investors move out.
Move out, yeah.
But anyway, the point was, even after his stint, our conversation and our projects were always nation building. So when I came to the AIM, they offered me the FVR chair in policy,
Wow.
which I gladly embraced.
Yes.
So I brought in again delegations from Japan and from other parts of the world to discuss national issues. And we always had a yearly event of the FVR chair that was global. We brought the Latin Americans, we brought the Japanese, we brought the ASEAN people for yearly dialogues. And the president would always honor us with his keynote. And he was so thrilled that it was continuing the tradition of his administration. So through those, I think we were able to tell him that, sir, this is our way of really fulfilling your dreams. Because if there are no people who will catch the torch
Yeah.
and pass it on, then
Yeah.
sayang. Eh.
Sayang.
Oh.
Yeah.
So this is the great legacy that he has. People were so inspired by his empowerment, by his technology and equality messages, Asia Pacific as the rising region of the world, and we carry it on.
What's one particular memory that you will never forget or always associate with him?
The APEC years.
Talaga.
We were in Subic already,
Aha.
and he had prepared for the Subic by gathering the leaders in the PICC in a security constructed enclosed room where the conversations were not monitored by other people. And he told me, we will have to have a heart-to-heart talk with these leaders in a confined environment. And so you must tell me how they react so that when I share the meeting next day, I will know the key points. But I said, Mr. President, you're so good at already identifying this because he's one-on-one relations with them.
Yes.
No, parang a separate perspective. So in Subic Summit, he wakes up so early in the morning and he says, come swim with me in the bay. I said, he had the stamina.
Oh.
My God, I said, for a person his age at that time,
Yes.
a person my age at that time, he had more stamina than we did. And so I said, this is where he gets his energy. He had the physical stamina to stand it all. So he knew how to prepare for that. So the message is great leaders know how to help themselves.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's a message for the others who cannot delegate, who cannot trust others around them, and try to do everything. So in the end, he's a 21st century creature. He knows how to harness,
Yeah.
including the technology devices to connect to his people. And in Subic, I think it was demonstrated that he succeeded. We had a further one-on-one with the leaders kasi closed door.
Yes, yes, yes.
And when he gave me his notes, they were much better than my notes. Because the key points of each leader, he summarized. And he said, okay, implement this. And I said, wow, he got the essence of everyone's statement. And kami, Tony Basilio and I, who were in the room, the only senior officials left in the room, we had copious notes. We could not see the picture from a forest view, but the president had that sense. Ang galing ng kanyang overview. That's why he succeeded militarily, economically, socially, politically. He had a very good sensing. That's the military in him, translated to nation building.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat.
Okay. I hope it helped.